So today, wow, today, what a special day. Our speaker today is Dr. Canter Brown. He is a Polk County native, born in Bartow and raised in Fort Meade. Graduated from Fort Meade High School, earned his Bachelor of Arts degree in history and a law degree from Florida State University. He returned to his alma mater to complete a PhD degree in United States history in 1994. His Florida's Peace River Frontier won the Florida Historical Society's Rembert Patrick Award for the best work published on a Florida subject. His doctoral dissertation, Ocean Bingley Hart, Florida's Loyalist Reconstruction governor, was awarded the American Association for State and Local History's Certificate of Merit. He authored and co-authored a score of works including Fort Meade, 1849 to 1900. And everybody in Fort Meade tells us what? Fort Meade's that oldest city in the county. In the midst of all that makes life worth living, Polk County, Florida, to 1950, and None Can Have Richer Memories, Polk County, Florida, 1940 to 2000. He's a member of the Polk County Public Schools Hall of Fame and the Fort Meade High School Hall of Distinguished Graduates. He retired in 2014 as professor of history at Georgia's Fort Valley State University, where he also served as executive vice president, acting vice president for academic affairs, and chief legal officer. Previously, he taught as professor of history at Florida A&M University and helped to highlight the area of history as historian in residence at the Tampa Bay History Center. Beautiful facility. His most recent work, he's co-authored with longtime colleague Larry Eugene Rivers, is Mary Edward Bryan, Her Early Life and Works, published just last year in 2015. And presently, I'm so excited about this, is researching a biography of Florida developer Henry Bradley Plant. We'll have to come back and hear more about that. So y'all join me in welcoming Dr. Brown back home.
So much. It is a delight to me, as some of you who know me will attest, to have any excuse to come home. I love where I'm from. I'm proud to be a Polk County native, and it is always a delight for me. So thank you. And thank you to my friends who have come and surprised me today, and also some new friends that I've already met today. So what a great opportunity for me. I'm going to do something today that I don't usually do, and I sort of apologize in advance. I'm going to read this because the History Center is filming it, and we're trying to keep this in sync with a publication that the History Center and the Polk County Historical Association will be publishing soon, I think. But as usual, you know I like to walk around and wave my hands and scream and holler and all this stuff, so I'm going to do that anyway, even if I'm reading. And hopefully it'll come across all right to you. And I have been told, let me reassure you, everyone here who knows that when I say, and let me make one more point, there's about an hour and a half to go, I've been told I will finish on time today. So let me put your minds at rest. Here we go. Today, we recognize and honor Spessard L. Holland. That we're here doing it in Bartow, his hometown, is especially fitting. As a boy, beginning lawyer, county judge, state senator, governor, and United States senator, Holland revered this place. He drew strength and comfort from this community that enabled him to battle over decades for deeply held causes and beliefs. And he rose from Polk County roots to offer leadership on local, state, and national levels, becoming in the process a figure of renown. The memory of his legacies, as with most men and women, has faded, though, with the passing years. The most enduring public reminder of him today, I suspect, is the prominence of his still thriving law firm, known over the world for almost half a century now as Holland and Knight. Standing, however, in defiance of that trend toward obscurity, his native Polk County for generations has attempted to preserve local history the good side and the bad, a cause that Holland himself embraced and furthered. How fitting then that last month, the Polk County History Center opened its new permanent exhibit right down the hall in the historic old courtroom, heralding this favorite son of the county that is often described as the heart of Florida. My aim over the next 40 minutes or so is to share thoughts and hopefully some insights about Spessard Holland as a very human being. Let me first, though, try to place his legacy within the context of his own times. Picture the year 1956. President Dwight D. Eisenhower, the close friend of Holland's Bartow schoolmate, General James Van Fleet, hero of World War II, Greece, and Korea, closeted himself in the White House to consider whether to retain controversial Vice President Richard M. Nixon on his re-election ticket. When an aide urged the president to take bold action and name a Democrat in Nixon's stead, Eisenhower immediately offered the name of Senator Spessard Holland. The president's advisors objected based on what they perceived as Holland's record on civil rights. But Eisenhower's esteem for his colleague and friend persisted across party lines. As Holland recalled late in life, Eisenhower was always extremely kind to me. For that matter, Richard Nixon himself, along with many others, recognized outstanding value in the Floridian. In a White House statement issued at the time of Holland's death in 1971, President Nixon proclaimed, "With the death of Spessard Holland, America has lost another of the distinguished public servants who guided her destiny in the crucial years following World War II." Nixon added, "His death is a sad occasion, not only for his many admirers in the South, but for all Americans who believe that service to country is one of the highest callings in our nation today." At the same time, former Governor Leroy Collins articulated the sentiments of countless admirers, describing his friend as a man who had strong beliefs and fought for them. He was a whole man. He was always on the right side. Lawton Chiles, Holland's protege and successor in the United States Senate, agreed. Surrounding a sense of personal loss at this time is a feeling of profound gratitude, Chiles insisted, for this life so nobly lived. As a public man, Holland justifiably claimed a variety of signal accomplishments. As governor from 1941 to 1945, he particularly advanced the cause of public education. He also displayed respect for preservation of the natural environment by, among other things, reforming the corrupt Florida Game and Freshwater Fish Commission. He proved a friend as well to the Everglades. The governor furthered preservation efforts and pressed for creation of what became the Everglades National Park. He achieved that goal in 1947 as a United States Senator. Some criticized him as a pragmatic, people-first conservationist, but the fact remained that when park backers despaired of success, Holland was the one who stepped forward. The park no longer needed a crusader on a sacred quest, historian Michael Grunwald concluded. It needed a practical politician to make a dream a reality. It needed Spessard Holland. Meanwhile, the senator's greatest legislative achievement, at least to those who shared his states' rights philosophy, was the Submerged Lands or Tidelands Act of 1946. The landmark legislation turned control over nearshore waters to the states. In most basic terms, again in historian Grunwald's words, it paved the way for the dredging and filling of most of Florida's coast. Like it or not, Spessard Holland opened the door to the creation of modern Florida. One more thing about Holland's states' rights philosophy deserves our attention, at least before we turn from the public Spessard Holland to the private man. As illustrated in the story about President Eisenhower and the vice presidency, the senator came to be known in the 1950s and 60s as a staunch opponent of civil rights for African Americans. This fact derived from his opposition to new civil rights legislation. When Florida NAACP leader Harry T. Moore solicited support for that cause from the senator in 1950, for instance, Holland responded by arguing, as one writer put it, against the civil rights program, placing great emphasis on states' rights, the right of Florida and other states to control within their own borders such matters as law enforcement, qualification of voters, employment practices, and education. Moore, who was soon to sacrifice his own life to Ku Klux Klan bombers, countered, "Since the days of Reconstruction, the doctrine of states' rights has been used against the Negro in the South. In retaining and exercising their powers, the Southern states have been very unfair to Negro citizens." Now, Holland's political philosophy, in fact, was a conservative one, at least in most respects. And he, along with many other prominent officials in the South and elsewhere, did fervently believe in states' rights. Unfortunately, many critics took what amounted in Holland's case, at least in my opinion, to a principled stand based upon honestly held constitutional grounds to be advocacy for racism. This was not the case with Holland. A book could be written on this subject, but let me offer a single illustrative instance that I think reflects broadly on Holland's perspectives and attitudes. The situation arose in May 1954 with the senator's response to the Supreme Court's watershed decision in the public school desegregation case Brown against Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas. Hosts of Southern leaders were fuming outrageously and broadcasting their support of defiance of the court's ruling. Senator Holland took a completely different tact, one that evidenced his moderation at a time when the large majority of Southern politicians felt their political needs better served by bombast. "This is a new law, make no mistake about it, and it appears to be final," he commented. "I certainly hope there will not be violent repercussions, but there will be a great many disappointed people, both white and colored." A reporter noted, "Holland said he thinks the vast majority will use moderation and examine carefully this ruling as it applies to them." This was a man who possessed an enormous reservoir of courage and a staunch personal ethic that he repeatedly called upon in support of justice for African Americans as well as for whites. Twice he intervened at his own peril to halt lynchings. One instance occurred during the 1920s in Lakeland and the other in 1940s Tallahassee while he served as governor. Daughter Mary Holland described the scene when Governor Holland confronted the Tallahassee mob. "They were armed with shovels and picks and guns," she recalled. "He went over to see for himself. He judged that there could not be a fair trial, so they moved the trial to Gainesville." She added, "He faced down some very angry people." His predecessor and successor as governor gained infamy for their toleration of extra-legal murder and expressions of racist sentiments. Holland stood out quite differently, however. As historian John Evans has observed, several instances from the career of Governor Spessard L. Holland suggest that programs or policies developed under his administration strove for racial justice. The author Zora Neale Hurston, who considered Spessard and his wife Mary to be her friends, held him up as my ideal of a Southern statesman. The Hollands welcomed Hurston to Florida's governor's mansion, made its library available to her, and maintained their interest and concern through the many ups and downs that Hurston endured. of Holland, she wrote admiringly in 1957, "It does not take much discernment to tell big wood from brush." She added, "And Mary Holland is his voice of gentleness, speaking from out of the whirlwind." Tellingly, Holland twice, in Florida in 1937 and again in Washington in 1962, managed to amend constitutions to prohibit the use of poll taxes as a deterrent for voting, one of the most effective mechanisms devised by southern states to exclude black voters from the polls. So, who was this son of Polk County? And how was he enabled to become a public man, courted by presidents and highly regarded by friends and colleagues? In my opinion, the answer has to begin with his parents, individuals who displayed special qualities in their own right. "The Lord was never better to any man," Holland once asserted, "than in the parents he gave me." Father Benjamin Franklin Holland was a Georgia native, born in 1846. As a boy, Frank fought in the Confederate Army alongside his father. At New Hope Church, northwest of Atlanta, he received severe wounds on June 22, 1864. He had suffered a badly shot right hand in battle, Spessard explained. "With that hand of his, he never could milk, so I had to." Following capture by federal troops and the Civil War's end, B.F. Holland attended Bowdoin College, a school of modest pretensions located in Carroll County, quote, 36 miles by stage west of Noonan, Georgia. He taught school for a while following graduation, but the depressing economic realities then prevailing in West Georgia compelled him by 1880 to hire out as a farmhand. He was selling oats the next year, by which time he suffered not only from chronic pain in his shattered right hand, but also from what doctors said was tuberculosis, but which may have been asthma. They believed he was going to die. In the circumstances, Frank Holland left Georgia and eventually put down roots in January 1882 at Polk County's then isolated seat here at Bartow. Curiosity and a sense that things could not get worse drove him. An old notebook carried by Benjamin Franklin Holland indicates, a newspaper reported, that he was attracted to Florida by the fact that the state had won 33 premiums at an exposition. His assets upon arrival amounted to $737.80. But in Polk's healthful climate, he regained physical health and economic well-being. Seeing opportunity, he founded the county's first abstract company. He also fell in love with his new home. As a Carroll County newspaper reported in 1885, Mr. H has been in Florida now about 3 years and is perfectly delighted with it. The next year, it advised readers, we learned that our young friend B.F. Holland of Bartow, Polk County, Florida, has recently been nominated for county treasurer of that county. Frank is a young man of sterling worth and integrity. We are glad to learn of this mark of confidence shown him in his Florida home and have no hesitation in saying from what we know of him, he will prove true to any trust given him. The confidence felt in Frank Holland by the Carroll Free Press's editor was not misplaced. By the late 1880s, Holland served the county well as its treasurer, just as he also served his beloved Bartow and its Methodist Church. As time passed, he became a county commissioner and for 20 years, a school board member and trustee of Summerlin Institute. In the meantime, he helped pioneer the shipment and marketing of local citrus in the north that we saw the program's going to be held partly about. County historian M.F. Hetherington summed up Holland and his contributions not long after Frank's death on January 6, 1925. And I think this is a lovely sentiment that anyone would be proud to have said of them. In every community, Hetherington wrote, there are certain citizens who are utterly devoted or are devoid of selfish motive, who strive unceasingly to better the moral and civic tone of their town, in many instances neglecting their own businesses to assist in accomplishing these things. Such a man was Benjamin Franklin Holland. If Spessard Holland's commitment to public service and high ethical standards owed much to his father, other qualities derived directly from his mother. Fanny Virginia Spessard first arrived in Bartow as the decade of the 1880s was drawing to a close. She aimed to teach at the newly built Summerlin Institute, then the only brick schoolhouse in South Florida. About 15 years younger than Frank Holland, possessing great intelligence and a striking beauty, she had been born in Newcastle, Virginia. Her family later relocated to Union, West Virginia, where she graduated from Johnson Female Seminary. She then taught school. In 1889, aghast that his daughter chose to take a job at what he called the end of the world, Jacob Peters Spessard pleaded with 28-year-old Fanny not to move to Bartow. Evidencing traits of individuality and stubborn persistence that would come to mark her son Spessard's life and career, she nonetheless set out for the adventure of Polk County life. She never looked back. It turned out that Fanny's students loved her, although she taught at Summerlin initially only from fall 1889 until her marriage to Frank in 1890. Deep respect and thirst for knowledge contained in books were distilled in those she taught, a friend later commented. One of her students added, while scholarship was held up as the most important job of the student, demanding his maximum effort, we were never allowed to forget that the main thing she was trying to teach was right living, never allowing her pupils to lose sight of the kind of men and women they wanted to be. Values and priorities played essential roles in Fanny's approach to mentoring the young. Chief among these was an abhorrence of the pursuit of wealth for its own sake, or at the cost of compromise of self or of principle. She often told her children she was interested in leaving them nothing, her friend noted, beyond what was in their heads and their hearts. They could take care of the rest. Given such influence, it is little wonder that in a feature on congressional incomes and ethics, published in 1968, a St. Petersburg Times headline proclaimed, quote, 22 years in Congress, $684,000 Holland poorer. The decade of the 1890s saw the Holland family grow upon solid foundations. The first child was a son whom they named Spessard Lindsey Holland. He arrived on July 10th, 1892. One more son and a daughter followed, Frank in 1895, and Virginia, later Mrs. Roy Trent Gallimore, in 1898. Reverence for the defeated South echoed in their home and resounded within the children's formative experiences. Spessard recalled among his first memories tales of battle spun by Confederate veterans and talk of family service in the war between the states. He insisted, though, that they weren't bitter memories, just Southern memories. His parents, meanwhile, dutifully served Confederate veterans organizations and auxiliaries. The Hollands prospered during most of Spessard's youth. Although not wealthy, they managed by 1895 to build a beautiful home called the Gables at 590 East Stanford Street. It remained the family home for decades and is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The same year, however, tragedy struck in the form of a series of disastrous freezes, known collectively as the Great Freeze of 1895. In common with most Polk residents, the Hollands found themselves struggling financially. Frank Sr.'s health dipped precariously. The impact of these events may have touched Spessard profoundly. Daughter Mary remembered him as a, quote, cost-conscious man, forever going around the house turning off lights and tightening faucets. she said he'd use the soap until you could hardly get any lather at all. Also, as related by the Lakeland Ledger, Holland insisted that the children clean their plates, a trait Mary believes came from a childhood when he might not have had enough to eat at times. Mostly, Spessard's boyhood proved, as journalist Charles Stafford concluded, happy and secure. Stafford commented, Spessard milked the cow daily in the old barn behind the gables. He hunted the meadows around Bartow, fished the Peace River, went to the Methodist church, and minded his teachers. There was roast chicken every Sunday. As a schoolboy, Spessard sometimes proved more full of spirit, though, than mindful of teachers. Spessard went through the public schools of Bartow with the usual extracurricular events that fall to the lot of most mischievous boys, one acquaintance related, his teachers being firm believers in the rule that to spare the rod might spoil the child. He added, despite his envious ability for quick learning without cramming, Spessard was a popular youth with his classmates, the star pitcher of his time in Summerlin Institute, and the stellar end of the football team. It was said, quote, he could do the 100-yard dash in something less than 20 seconds flat. He stood out. For one thing, he matured into a very handsome young man. He turned girls' heads without any effort. It may have been hero worship, admitted childhood friend Bernice Lyle, but as a little girl, it always seemed to me that Spessard Holland could climb our Chinaberry tree higher, could walk the picket fence further, and generally outdo all the rest of the kids in our block. Bernice added, if ever the qualities of leadership were born and bred into a boy, Spessard Holland enjoys a natural heritage that cannot be denied. Her thoughts in that regard were shared by others who knew him. Invariably, when asked for their outstanding recollections regarding their early association with him, the Polk County Record noted in 1940, on the eve of Holland's election as governor, his qualities of leadership are the first mentioned. Summerlin graduation in 1909 saw Holland aiming not to capitalize on his leadership gifts with a political career, though, but at becoming a teacher like his mother. He chose Emory College at Oxford, Georgia, as the place to pursue his education. And once again, he excelled. Completion of requirements for a Bachelor of Philosophy degree in history took him only 3 years, and he graduated magna cum laude. Along the way, the young man lettered in basketball and baseball, despite time-consuming commitments to the football and track teams. He also served as literary editor of the campus magazine, the Emory Phoenix. To pay the bills, he worked, or at least worked to some extent. Holland explained to one reporter that he labored as a janitor. Somewhat skeptically, the reporter observed, the word is his, though he is not precisely certain how it related to janitoring. Athletes. For 2 years after leaving Emory in 1912, the college graduate taught school in Georgia. The best job he could secure was that of instructor in the public school at Warrenton, located not far from Oxford. As one recollection put it, during this period, Holland became acquainted with the real trials of a school teacher, and it was at this point that he decided to do something to aid that profession if he ever were given the opportunity. This was a commitment that stuck with him. Education was really my first love, he explained in 1940 as a state senator running for governor. I began my career as a school teacher, and I owe a great deal to that experience. I know the problems, difficulties, and handicaps of the Southern school teacher, especially in Florida, because I have had actual experience with these same problems. For that reason, I have devoted much of my time and effort towards striving to improve the Florida school system and working conditions and standards of Florida teachers. Holland's commitment to public education for all never wavered, even as calls for massive resistance and suspension of schools resounded in the South in the desegregation era. His understanding of its importance recognized the crucial role that public education plays in a democratic republic. It also highlighted how important were efforts, quote, to improve the working conditions and standards of Florida teachers, a lesson in good governance from which many politicians today could benefit. I believe in a liberal education because democracy cannot survive without knowledge, Holland asserted. All of our children should be given equal opportunity to obtain an education so that they might make better citizens, citizens better able to help solve the vital problems forever confronting our people. This stance offered one of the keys to understanding Zora Neale Hurston's admiration for the governor and senator. When it came to the solution of the race question in Florida, she recorded, he began at the only realistic place to begin, the foundation, by stepping up the educational program among us. However deeply his teaching experience touched the still impressionable young man, it soon came to an end as other callings diverted his attention. Disappointment probably had something to do with it. In late 1912, while teaching at Warrenton, he sought a Rhodes Scholarship that would have enabled him to pursue graduate studies at England's Oxford University. Surviving reports indicate that he passed the examination, but that, quote, conditions in Europe at that time, incident to the outbreak of World War I, prevented him from availing himself of this privilege. The war didn't erupt until August 1914, however, suggesting some other cause intervened. Perhaps there was a girl, or one or both of his parents preferred that he remain closer to home. The truth may never be known beyond Holland's description of the situation as, quote, a just missed opportunity. Rather than pursuing the Rhodes Scholarship, Spessard chose law school at the University of Florida. He supported himself by teaching Latin and mathematics in what was called the sub-freshman department. He worked as well in the mess hall. During the 3-year course leading in 1916 to his Bachelor of Laws degree, he competed on the football field while lettering in baseball and basketball. He proved so adept at baseball that he only narrowly missed out on a pro career. At least, Connie Mack approached him on the subject after Holland stood out prominently in a Gator match against manager Mack's Philadelphia Athletics. As at Emory, Holland excelled not only in athletics, but also in scholarly pursuits. His performances as a member of the John Marshall Debating Society especially caught attention throughout the South. On one occasion at the University of Florida in the mid-19-teens, Holland hinted that his sights increasingly were centering on Florida and perhaps even a political career. The moment came on class day in June 1915. The president of the combined senior classes urged, quote, continued loyalty to the university on the part of those who are about to go forth to ply their untried ambitions. Spessard responded as president of the combined junior classes. He is a capable young orator, and what he said was not only uttered in a pleasing vein, but was logical, a Tampa Tribune report described. He promised unflagging loyalty on the part of the juniors and felt sure that the sons who are to leave the college halls next week will never forget Florida and her interests when they had opportunity to do something or say something in her cause. The lawyer-to-be graduated with honors in June 1916, regarded as one of the outstanding members of his class. By then, however, fate had intervened, and I love this story. Fate had intervened to reset priorities and dictate his future direction, at least in terms of where he would live and work. The event occurred in December before graduation. Not for the first time or the last, a girl from Florida State captured the heart of a Gator. On his way to visit friends in Georgia, Holland stopped off in Jacksonville to see his sister Virginia, who was journeying home for the holidays from Tallahassee's Florida State College for Women. Quote, when she got off the train, her classmate was with her, Mary Groover, Spessard reminisced. I looked up and here came this wonderful girl off the train. But unfortunately, there was another boy to meet her. Mary's attention focused on her date, and she gave Virginia's oldest brother little attention. Charles Stafford completed the story, the journalist. He went on to Georgia, but in 3 days he was back in Florida using any flimsy excuse to visit the Groover home in Lakeland. He had been seized by a deep love, and to this day, Stafford was writing in 1970, it hasn't let him go, nor her. His feelings for Mary Groover meant that whatever alternatives Holland previously had weighed for his professional life, he would return to Bartow, practice law, and woo Mary Groover. And that is exactly what he did. He partnered with established practitioner Robert Bassett Huffaker, a family friend and former Summerlin Institute principal who attended the Methodist Church alongside the Hollands. Settling in, Spessard passed the bar exam despite spending as much time as humanly possible with Mary. He won a legal career and the girl. The couple soon agreed to an engagement and began planning for a future together. At that point, an event occurred that profoundly altered all of those plans. One that set in motion a train of events that laid bare the stuff of which Spessard Holland was made, displayed for all the world to see the kind of man he was, and established him in the public eye, at least in Polk County, as an individual to be reckoned with in the future. This took place on April 4th, 1917, when the United States Congress declared war against Germany and ushered the nation into World War I. Matters proceeded the next day when Holland volunteered for Army service. Although it took him until late summer 1918 to find his way into combat, he persisted despite assignments that would have kept him safe from harm. At one point, he was stationed in Key West and played baseball for the Army. His bottom line was a desire to fight, as Benjamin Franklin Holland had done alongside his own father during the Civil War. The role Spessard finally landed was as an observer in the Army Air Corps, flying over hotly contested war zones in France. His tasks included defending his plane and pilot with a machine gun while leaning out into enemy gunfire to locate military movements and targets on the ground. Not a job for the faint of heart. The stories of Holland's heroism deserve to be told. His experience there was remarkable. I will mention specifically that he associated most of his wartime exploits with his friend, the pilot George E. Goldthwait. They remained friends for life. Captain Holland showed not only the utmost bravery, Goldthwait asserted, but also what was much less commonplace, the keenest intelligence, the greatest skill in the use of his special training, and withal a personality which not only commanded respect of all around him, but endeared him as well to his equals in rank, subordinates, and superiors alike. Lieutenant, then Captain Holland, shot down one German plane and engaged numerous others. He survived a crash landing. The soon veteran warrior evidenced through it all poise and good humor. President Woodrow Wilson, acting upon the recommendation of Holland's superior officers, recognized his valor and awarded the captain the Distinguished Service Cross in recognition of extraordinary heroism in action. And the wonderful exhibit, permanent exhibit down in the courtroom, contains that Distinguished Service Cross. The University of Florida's Florida Alligator trumpeted the news of his heroism on its first front page. The Associated Press heralded him among the Florida heroes of the war. As it turned out, those published accounts were required in order to make his heroism known. He wouldn't talk about it. A modest Holland, as the Polk County Record observed, was extremely reluctant to speak of his career in the World War. The sentiments of Bartow and Polk County folk as to their hero appeared readily, though. Mary Groover married him. The date was February 8th, 1919. Spessard remained in the military for the time being. Conditions in Polk County, meanwhile, turned violent in the midst of a phosphate worker strike. The county prosecutor offered to resign his job if Holland would accept its responsibilities. He agreed in July. Despite possessing little practical experience in the law, Spessard managed to negotiate a tortuous path to labor peace in a fashion most local people judged fair and even-handed. People trusted him and believed they could rely upon him. The voters certainly felt that way because the next year they elected the 28-year-old veteran county judge. And he served for 8 years. Spessard Holland's subsequent rise to political prominence has been explained, analyzed, detailed by any number of excellent biographers and journalists, and is now well documented here in the Polk County History Center. What remains for us, I think, is to take a short peek at how the private man coped with the glare of the political spotlight, the adulation of so many friends and supporters, and the temptations of fame and power. The fact was that the Hollands did not change much at all, at least not when it came to the basics. A few examples may help to illustrate the broader picture. First, Mary would have insisted on maintaining matters as they were, even if her husband had not already been disposed to do so. A Miami reporter characterized her at the time she moved into the governor's mansion. She possesses the sort of loveliness which imbues one with the feeling that she is proud to be pretty, that in the midst of her romantic existence, she is faintly conscious of being the heroine, Maybelle Manning observed. Not only is she the leading lady of her family, but also with the entire population of aristocratic old Tallahassee. Other than for the 4 years the family occupied the mansion, Mary kept them centered at Bartow. When congressional sessions required their presence in Washington, the couple occupied a one-room apartment in a hotel. A wild night on the town consisted of an evening dancing. At one point in the early 1950s, Senator Holland was considered the best dancer in Congress. One nightclub manager commented, "He and his wife Mary stop the crowd when they show up at our place. I understand they practice in the living room of their hotel suite." Always, whether at home, in the governor's mansion, or in the nation's capital, there was music. The couple shared in the enjoyment. Spessard taught himself to play the piano early on, and they would sing together. Her soft soprano voice complemented his deep bass, daughter Mary recalled. Naturally, he sang as well in Bartow's Methodist choir. Maybelle Manning preserved a story that epitomizes the overlapping of their love for music and their love for one another. Arriving at the governor's mansion at noon, the sound of music greets us, someone playing in a dreamy and improvised manner, whistling a thoughtful accompaniment to "When I Grow Too Old to Dream," she reported. Tiptoeing through the broad, polished hall for a peep, we found Governor Holland himself, with his hat still cocked jauntily on the side of his head, home for lunch. "This is the way Spessard always lets us know he is home," said Mary. "There's nothing he's ever heard that he can't sit down and play." At home, according to daughter Mary, the Hollands had 4 children in all. And is this Ivanhoe? We're so honored to have his daughter Ivanhoe here with us. Thank you for coming. At home, according to daughter Mary, the Hollands had 4 children in all. Spessard made the rules in line with conservative tradition, and I'm going to quote you here in just a second, and everyone was expected to obey them. No cards were played on Sundays, for instance. No movies on the Sabbath. Up at 7 a.m. and asleep by 11 p.m. His hours, he felt, were good enough for everybody. Nobody could leave the dinner table. All dined in the evening together until Father had shared a passage from a book or a poem. Still, daughter Ivanhoe recalled that her father, quote, was a bit of a tease and had a good sense of humor. To her, he represented an old-fashioned Southern gentleman who enjoyed neighbors. She added, he loved being home. The one exception to following the rules, naturally, was wife Mary. Her namesake daughter commented that he couldn't dictate to her mother. Mary added, she was quite a challenge to him. He adored my mother. He was very loving. Extremely loving toward my mother. He told her he loved her every day. He called her darling. Let me close by noting that as the Hollands carefully maintained the happy and traditional nature of their family lives at home, Spessard remained his basic self through his final days. Daughter Mary related a telling account for the Lakeland Ledger. Holland, a letterman in football, basketball, and track, was a competitor until the end, reporter Diane Lacey Allen related. He died of a heart attack on November 6, 1971, at the age of 79, keeping up with one of his loves, she continued. He was listening to the Georgia-Florida game, Mary says. Georgia was ahead. We always thought if Georgia had been winning, it'd have lived a little longer. His pills were on the other side, the radio to his right. He was turning toward the radio as if to turn it off. Georgia won 49-7. Thank you very much.